in the Bishop Lavis area, apparently been kidnapped by Colombian cartels because he's been linked to a cocaine shipment that apparently was lost at sea. He was, according to his family, summoned to a meeting in Gauteng and has not been seen since. Jeremy Vearey is someone who has literally studied the history of gangs in Cape Town, former head of detectives. Jeremy, really appreciate your time. Is it accurate, as Imran had said, that international crime syndicates like the cartels in Colombia have now firmly entrenched themselves as part of the makeup of organized crime in the city of Cape Town?
Yes, I think if one goes back to the early attempts to get cocaine into the country, that dates back to the early 90s, for example, with some arrests that were made after a return from Colombia via Brazil of a Cape Townian, a white Cape Townian, who in the time of the, when cocaine was still a middle-class drug, freebasing. At that time, many of that supply that came through those individuals who went overseas to buy cocaine was supplied to people like Jackie Lonte. And Jackie Lonte used the supply he got from travelers who went over there and made deals to produce crack initially. One of the first producers of crack in the Western Cape. So this is 90s, early 90s, even before the advent of our democracy, before the election. The second thing is, I remember when we were looking for Rashid Stachy around about the rape time, when we hunted him down for that. He ran all over the place. But during the course of our investigations, we discovered that he had met some people in Brazil during one of his trips, and that these were people linked, I think it was back then, to the Kali cartel, or people associated with the Kali cartel back then. So this is not new, it's not, perhaps different with Jaggers now. It's just that we get to hear about it now much more prominently in the media.
What do you make of the apparent disappearance, the apparent kidnapping of Peter Jaggers, an alleged gang boss here in Cape Town? Apparently, according to his family, last meeting with international cartel members in Gauteng, and he has not been seen since. What do you make of this particular story?
Well, I consider it within the realm of, I don't know the facts much, but that is normal modus operandi. You don't, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Colombian cartel or a local gang. If you know the old history of the Cape gangsters, guys make a drug deal, and then the guys who set you up run away with the money and the deal. But anyway. Earlier, Rashid Stachy modus operandi was, for example, a similar thing. So these kind of, if the allegations are true, the knocks of drug dealers knocking each other, these things are quite, it has always been the feature of the drug trade. I think we are just a bit surprised now with the fact that people are doing it against the Colombians. But a Cape gangster is a Cape gangster.
Do you share Ibrahim Mukadam's thoughts that crime and violence has always been a security issue, not just on a very local level, but in all tentacles of local organized crime and transnational crime? But do you think and do you agree that it's reached a level of a national security issue?
Absolutely. It's a view that I maintained in the police, even going back to the 95, 96 period. And one looked at it from a purely technical or definitionary basis. If one thinks about what we look at national security, you see the doctrine of national security has changed to include human security. And That being the emphasis instead of just state security, how the freedom of movement, the rights of ordinary human citizens in various geographical locations where they find themselves are affected. It's almost the same in equivalence to whether the state is attacked. So let's look at this practically. If you live in Manenberg and your right of freedom of movement is curtailed because the area is divided into turfs, it's a fundamental human right that is affected. If you can't attend a certain school or a church because you happen to live in the turf of another gang and your church is in the turf of another gang, then your freedom of association is affected. So if you have a business in Manenberg and you have to pay dues in the form of extortion money that is unlawful over and above your obligations to the states in terms of taxation, VAT and whatever, etc., then you're dealing with parties who have usurped control over certain areas that they have no right to for private accumulation of capital or money, and in an unlawful way. So you're dealing with people who are trying to govern the area and replace state governance in an area. If everything, freedom of movement of citizens, business conducted in an area, normal services of the state in an area, be that security, be that sanitary, be that whatever services are required, have to be navigated with through gangsters as if they control and practice self-ownership over an area, then you're dealing with a counter-state threat. And if the violence is used to enforce that control, you are dealing with terrorism.
Now, Jeremy, you've built poker cases for the NPA. These are complex cases that deal with gang membership, that deals with financial interests. But the question is, should the definition of criminal gang membership not be changed to be as simplistic as possible? I'm hesitant to use the example of El Salvador and what President Nayib Bukele has been doing, where anyone who is merely affiliated with a gang can be charged and can be incarcerated. I don't think that example necessarily matches up with our constitutional order in South Africa. But should the definition of criminal gang membership be made as simplistic as possible to get as many of these gang members off the streets here in the city of Cape Town, here in this country of South Africa?
I fully agree. It should be simplified. It is quite dated. Let me explain it to you. Chapter 4 that covers the gang provisions of the Act is almost, you must go study it, a literal reproduction of the street terrorism enforcement legislation program of the STEP Act that was used in the 80s in South Central Los Angeles to deal with gangs there, the Crips and the Bloods and those things. I think you are familiar from movies with what South Central Los Angeles is about. And it was the first type of gang legislation that was introduced at the city level to repress gangsterism. Now we all know it cast a very wide net, as the definition back then allowed it to cast. And the challenges that you have now were the challenges they experienced, and they also had to refine their legislation.
I really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for always your consideration to talk to us.